Welcome back everybody to BeamNG.drive, and today we're taking a look at the Hirochi Sunburst 2.0 Sport. This has a DCT gearbox, which means double clutch transmission. Makes it a lot faster in 0 to 60 and 0 to 100 times. And yeah, it's got a 2 litre naturally aspirated inline 4 engine, producing 156 horsepower, 151 pounds-feet of torque, weighs 2,932 pounds, so a little heavy for a car of this horsepower and torque, but still. It is able to do 0 to 60 in 7.1 seconds, 0 to 100 in 19.1 seconds, and go to a top speed of 135 miles an hour. So fairly quick for a car with less than 200 horsepower. Made between 2009 and 2014, and this comes with sport wheels and sport suspension, being the sport model. And yeah, it's front wheel drive. And yeah, so I'm expecting this to be not the toughest of vehicles that we've taken around here, but it should hopefully hold up for a little while. And being a sporty car, it's really rather agile, which is always nice to see. That suspension is a lot lower than it would have been normally, so it's going to be taking some punishment here. Be anywhere near as softly sprung as the standard version. I wanted a bit of power from this, so that's why I've gone for this version. And you'll probably have noticed that I've turned the traction control off, because that can play havoc when going across bumps like this. It will be constantly losing traction and gaining traction, and it will be just trying to stop the engine from putting power down. Up and down, up and down. Well, it seems to have dealt with all of that so far really nicely. Cobbles probably won't trouble it too much. In front wheel drive, it does have some understeer, so we have to contend with that. And the reason I say this is probably not going to last as long as some cars that we've had on this series is because, well, front wheel drive means that you have the front wheels doing pretty much everything, and they're likely to take the more damage than the rear wheels. So yeah, it can be easy to lose drive, or steering, or the exhaust in this case. Whoa! No suspension not doing us wonders there. The front bumper as well as the exhaust. Oh, we've lost the fuel tank as well, which is a first for this series. Oh dear, at least outside of crash testing, so we have a limited amount of time left on this car. We're not just starved of oil, we're also starved of fuel. So we have our first fuel failure here. Whoa dear, and we've rolled. Just for good measure. Come on, roll back. There we go. And there we go, final jump. So yeah, if the fuel tank hadn't got this, this would eventually have overheated because the radiator went. But overall, I think that survived it fairly well. The wheels seem to be still fairly straight. The suspension is still mostly there. So yeah, pretty surprised by how tough this is overall, to be honest. So, right, let's get to the other side of the grid map, where we're going to be going on a rollover sled, and then we'll be crashing it up against some barrels, and then we'll be that are explosive, and then a cinder block wall. So yeah, let's see how this does with rollover tests. We're doing 3 of these consecutively, so the damage is going to be concurrent. So yeah. Oops. So yeah, we're gonna see if this can handle 3 of them. No idea how this is going to perform, to be honest. But it is one of the newer cars that we've had, so it shouldn't be too bad in terms of crash protection, but whether or not those wheels and suspension and everything else can handle it, we'll have to see. Wheels already look a bit bent up. And obviously if we cannot make it back to the crash, the overall rollover sled, then we will deem it a failure, as we have seen before in some cars have lost a wheel or just been too heavily damaged to get there. Well, nearly rolled back on our feet. Yeah, there has definitely been some wheel damage there on that right wheel, and the roof has taken some damage, but it hasn't caved in completely, so that is a good sign. And this is another reason we don't have traction control on, because that can play havoc with the car when wheels start going out of alignment, because the traction control just does not know what to do. Right. See the sports suspension there hanging loose, or hanging down even, not loose because it's not broken yet. Bonnet has come up, so I'm going to lose a rear bumper as well as the front one. Does roll nicely, certainly rolls better than the Moonhawk did. But it's not really taking all that much damage in terms of the roof. And we've even rolled back over. Well, the wheels are again going out of alignment, the rear wheels especially, which is obviously not a good sign. Yeah, both of those have gone, so whoa! Control is rather limited at the moment, but at least it's not an all-wheel drive model, which would have made the handling even worse, because those out of alignment wheels are currently just being dragged and not, you know, powered. Third and final test. So this is purely going to be about the crash safety, because we no longer need to drive. And it looks like we're wouldn't be able to anyway, because one of those wheels is popping off. Or being front wheel drive, it might be able to drag that wheel along if it has enough power. At least it's holding on though. It's quite a sturdy wheel setup that it's been able to hold on at that angle. And it does like to roll over on its own, so yeah, I think I've dealt with that fairly well. Still does drive to a certain extent, but it's hardly road legal, although it does seem to drive a bit straighter than it did originally, even with all of the wheel alignment out. So yeah, and the roof overall has held up. It's squished up a bit, but it's not come right down or anything. It's just basically squished upwards in the middle, which is fine enough, I guess. And the rest of the bodywork has obviously taken the typical kind of damage, but nothing that's gonna stop the car from driving. So yeah, overall that's a pass. So let's see what happens when we come up against the explosive barrels. doubtful about whether or not the car will be able to drive after this being front wheel drive, but might well hold up to the explosion itself in terms of interior safety. Ooh, yeah, the engine has completely fallen out. The entire front subframe is coming away. Land on the rear, yes. Well, there goes the wheel. Not that we can drive anywhere anyway with a broken engine, but yeah, that has dealt with the explosion there really nicely for passenger safety. Obviously the car is a wreck, but the car taking the damage is preferable to anyone inside, so yeah, that's a pass, even though I think the steering wheel has jutted upwards a bit, but at least it's jutted upwards and back, not upwards and forwards. So yeah, overall a pass there. So let's see what it can do against a cinder block wall. This is obviously the first real crash safety test that we're going to be doing. We've pummeled the suspension to death and done the roof in, so what about frontal crash safety when up against something a bit more normal like a wall? Ooh. Yep, that's a pass. Windscreen hasn't moved in. The front has taken the brunt of the force there and not anyone inside. Yes, the sunroof smashed, but it's very unlikely that a cinder block would fall through that small gap. So, yeah, overall a pass for this car on the grid map. Yes, it did get a fuel leak and then a fuel fire, or it would have done eventually if we'd have spotted it up a bit more, but which is obviously a bit of a fail, but in terms of the rollover, the explosion and the cinder block wall, all a pass there. So yeah, 3 for 4 is pretty good. So let's get to the crash hall and see what this can do at 30, 40 and 60 miles an hour with the small overlap crash test. Right, so here we are at the crash hall once again to see how a car will do in a small overlap crash test. So as per usual, we'll start off at 30, then work our way up to 40 and then eventually 60. So yeah, really interested to see what this can do, because obviously it's quite a lightweight vehicle, but it's also quite a modern one as well. But whether or not it's going to be modern enough to deal with these crash tests, we'll have to see. Obviously we've seen what the ultimate modern car can do in terms of the Vivace, or the Cherio, whatever it's called. So let's see what a late 2000s, early 2010s car can do. Yeah, that's fairly successful. You can see where the crumple zone is just before the door, which has worked very well. And the car, no doubt, is still able to drive as well. Yeah. No, that wheel does not look 100% secure. So there we go. So let's see 40 miles an hour. We have seen dramatic changes between 30 and 40 before. Let's see if it's going to be any different here. Nope. Not even the driver's side window has cracked. It's fairly impressive. In terms of interior space, well, you can see the dashboard is starting to warp, and so is the centre console, which does throw up the question of whether or not the steering wheel is going to start moving at 60 miles an hour. But yeah, overall that's done that really nicely. So yeah, now the ultimate test of 60 miles an hour, which has made plenty of car fail. So let's see if this Sunburst is going to be the exception to the rule. Oh yes, that is a massive difference between 40 and 60 there. Like I said, I was worried about that steering wheel and the dashboard moving forward, and it has done that. But not just that, the door is completely warped and crushed, which would make that nigh impossible to get open if you were trying to get someone out of the car. And then the roof has also gone upwards as well. Yeah, that is quite devastating, to be honest. Yeah, the steering wheel is practically where the driver is. Yeah, 60 mile an hour, a complete failure. 30 and 40 are fine, but 60, like so many cars on this series, has completely shown up the failure of this car. Right, nonetheless, let's get onto the highway and see what this does up against two similar sized and weighted vehicles, and then one that really isn't. Right, welcome to the highway. So like I said, we're going to go up against two vehicles that are similarly sized and weighted, and then one that really isn't. So yeah, we're going to go up against the Ibishu Pezima wagon, which surprisingly weighs the same as this Sunburst, despite that car being far older and yeah, obviously a little bit bigger being a wagon, as you can see. So yeah, let's set both of these vehicles off. Let's see what happens. Line them up. Well, mostly. That's fine. Oh, that's a crushing impact for both cars there. Yeah, I'd be surprised if either survived in that one, to be honest. The Pesima's definitely worse though, because the steering wheel is far further back, which I guess is no surprise given it's a far older car. But yeah, the Sunburst has hardly gotten away with that with flying colours. It's better, but not by much, and yeah, I'd have to say that'd be a failure. But obviously, they weren't fully, you know, head on. They were just slightly off. But that's, you know, the most common kind of crash. Direct head-on crashes aren't as common as you'd expect. It's usually offset, just like the small overlap crash test, which is one reason why that is done so often these days. So yeah, let's find another car that is similarly weighted. I imagine an ETK would be 3120. Maybe a Cherry of Hirochi is. It's a little bit heavier, but you know, similar enough. So we'll go for this. See what the two relatively similar age vehicles can do. Obviously this is 2020, so it's a few years newer, but be interesting to see what a proper modern car can do against a slightly less modern car. For all we know, the Vivace's crumple zones might well lessen the impact of the Sunburst. Bit better on head-on this time. Oh no, that did not work at all. Still a better impact than with the Pezima though, purely because we're head-on. But yeah, you can see the difference there between just a few years in car design. How the Vivace has practically got away with that fine. Yes, the steering wheel has jutted up a little bit, which might make the airbag a bit inefficient, but the overall shape of the car has practically unchanged, whereas with the Sunburst, as you can see, the roof has gone up, the door has bowed outwards, which, yeah, at the end of the day is a crash failure in a lot of ways. Not doing well, the Sunburst, and it's not going to get any better with the heavyweight vehicle we're going to put it up against now. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's been, you know, a total failure on this highway, but it's been far from the best success that we've had, which is a bit of a shame. So well, how weighty is a hopper in comparison? It's only a few £100 more. I want to go with a sport version of a hopper, just to see you know, sport coupe versus sport off-roader. Maybe a Gravel Roma has a sport version. Yes, a V8 Road Sport. Right, we'll go for that then. That's £4,949. The LXT though is even heavier. Yeah, we'll go for this. Heavier is better when it comes to this third and final crash test. That is a bit of a monstrous beast, that is. I think it's going to make mincemeat of the Sunburst, to be honest. To be honest, that could have been a lot worse. But I'd imagine it wouldn't have been survivable either way. But given how much heavier the Roma is, I was expecting a lot more in the way of damage. Surprisingly not. Although, again, like I said, it's hardly looking like a survivable crash. With the wheel in the footwell and the steering wheel right up against the seat. So, yeah, the Sunburst has been a bit of a mixed job there. It's survived the rollover crash test fine, the explosive barrel and cinder block crash test fine. Some of the grid map, because the suspension was still fairly decent, and so was the steering, but obviously the fuel tank blew up, which is obviously not helpful. And yeah, on the small overlet crash test, it did the 30 and 40 mile an hour impacts fine, but the 60 mile an hour one was a complete failure. And here, even though the the car hasn't completely been eviscerated in these crash tests, it's hardly been a car that's passed with flying colours. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag, but still an overall solid car and a really rather decent based vehicle in the game as well. But nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.